time.
Hello participants, attention please. We're moving on to the next topic and here's what we have prepared for you. For 20 years, the way you find out what's happening has run through a handful of companies. It's complicated. Journalism and big tech, the ultimate situationship. And lately, they've stopped pretending it ends with the feed. They also appear to be expanding in influence in elections and legislation. So let's ask the uncomfortable question. Is this a partnership or a power play? Let's talk about journalism's love-hate relationship with big tech. So let's get ready for another exciting discussion.
Yeah, hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen. While I was standing now here and looking into the room, I want to get a bit personal, very small. You always get the question, why do you work for Deutsche Welle? I've been working over 16 years for Deutsche Welle. I'm a passionate journalist, but moments like this, when I look into the room and I see people from more 110 countries coming together, and I see more than 1,500 participants coming together, and now, especially in these times, where we know there are a lot of crises, but you came from different countries, you are ready to talk, you're ready to discuss, and you're ready to have a good time all together. And from my personal point of view, that's a worth very big applause for every one of you because you joined us. A bit more louder because it's about getting loud today. And today we want to get loud. We have 5 fantastic panelists. We have 45 minutes. And we have one question we would like to know. How's the relationship between big tech and journalism? Is it toxic, hate, love? Is there a possibility for a partnership? But how does it look like? And that's why you and every one of you will be part also of this discussion. And that's why we're going to start with the first question. I'm not going to take the Mentimeter. I would like you to raise your hands. Do you believe and do you support a partnership between big tech and journalism, or you say, no, we should take distance? Who is for a partnership? Okay, a bit surprising. And who says distance? And who is still like, I'm not sure yet, I don't know what the situationship is about? Okay, so we have different perspectives, different inputs, and that's why I already told you we have 5 panelists, but our first panelist will answer this question. She will give her perspective how this partnership should look like, and that's why I'm very happy to welcome the director of the Center for Journalism and Liberty at the Open Markets Institute in Washington. Please give a very big welcome applause for Courtney Radsch.
So we did recently rebrand for the Center for Media and Digital Governance, but I want to put out there that society does not usually prepend the word big to an industry out of respect and admiration. Big tobacco got its big before in the 90s before getting hauled before Congress because of its addictive products that cause death and cancer. Big pharma got its B a few years later. We do it out of fear in preparation for a battle, which tells you something about what we're actually saying when we ask a question about whether we can partner with big tech. Do you think that the janitors in this building feel like partners? Maybe not this building. The janitors at big tech feel like partners of the big tech firms? Are we partners when we're cleaning up all of the crud and disinformation spreading online? I would say no. But there is a prehistory that is definitely worth remembering, because remember when big tech, before it became big tech, it promised us new ways to produce, distribute, monetize our journalism, reach audiences that no print publication or broadcast could possibly reach on their own. These innovation promises panned out for a while, until it became big tech. What happened is everything since consolidated power over our information ecosystem, over the tools we use to produce and distribute news, to connect with our audiences, to earn digital revenue. They, it turns out, became big tech because they consolidated power. But journalism, it turns out, is what ecologists would call a keystone species. And it's a keystone species for three interconnected ecosystems that are under threat. The information ecosystem, where fact-based reporting provides the foundation for political engagement and economic viability. Democracy, where a reporter cultivating a source and getting that really interesting information within a power structure is the actual mechanism of accountability, not regurgitating an AI-generated press release with the official position. And the AI systems that are now being built on top of journalism's own ruins. So when the internet was open, publishers traded content and visibility for traffic that they could translate into monetization, connect with new audiences. But as Google and Facebook supported news and innovation, training, tool integration, direct funding of outlets and conferences that they depend on, subsidizing fact-checking, they were concentrating their power through platformization, taking control of how people search for and find information, curating visibility through profit-maximizing algorithmic curation, and the monetization logic undergirding the entire digital economy. So if you look at where this investment actually flowed, you'll see a pattern. It flowed to countries that were threatening regulation, or most likely to regulate these industries. And it tended to matter more in countries where their economies matter to their bottom line, often leaving those in poorer and less well-resourced countries to adapt to the surveillance logic, the extremist engagement, and the addicted algorithms that undergird their platforms. Big tech spent millions of dollars opposing legislation in Brazil, Canada, the US, Europe, to name a few, that would have forced more equitable terms between publishers and platforms. And it threatened retaliation by pulling news from their dominant platforms, which, as you know, Meta did in Canada, and it threatened to do in Europe, or Google did in Europe. And then they eviscerated their support for independent fact-checking. How many of you here were fact-checkers that got support from Google or Meta? Well, now they're laying claim to the world's journalism for the building of their AI systems and their large language models. Google's illegal monopolies in search and in advertising left publishers with crumbs from their trillion-dollar empire. It now recycles that in ill-gotten largesse into its AI ambitions, while leveraging its dominance in search, in maps, in productivity tools, in cloud, to further adoption and force adoption of generative AI. OpenAI earned its membership in the big tech billionaire brotherhood when it laid claim to strip mining the world's journalism, the world's information and creative content to build its large language models, and paying nothing, and turning that data, fueling the investment cycles that set the trajectory for the trillion-dollar AI race that we are now in, that we are told we must take part in, that we must integrate these tools into our workflows, into our editorial systems, or risk being left behind. This race is happening on increasingly shaky ground, however. Journalism scraped from the open web is critical to AI, training, grounding, inference, and to the LLMs, the chatbots, the generative search. And by making discretionary deals with just the biggest publishers or those most likely to sue, big tech is once again dampening resistance and breaking down solidarity. So most critically, journalism is one of the only things that is keeping AI tethered to reality. It guards against epistemological collapse. How do we know what we know? This collapse is what happens when AI trains on AI-generated content, like a photocopy of a painting of a picture, each generation drifting a little further from reality. That's journalism's role as a keystone species, not just for democracy, but for the very systems that are being built to replace the reporters who make self-government possible. So as I wrote in the Washington Monthly last year, AI needs us more than we need it. At least I like to think that. Just recently, Axios made a deal with OpenAI to open a bunch of local newsrooms and news products. The American Journalism Project has a deal with OpenAI to use its cloud credits and free cloud credits and training for newsroom partners. And AI startup Noda launched a dozen local newsrooms because, as its founder told me at a conference last year, this was a way that he could help produce journalism for a dozen of communities with one editorial person overseeing all of that, and then generate that data and feed it back into his model to give it a competitive advantage. In doing so, by using the feeds from YouTube of council meetings and other recorded public data, he could generate journalism, valuable new data that would give him a competitive advantage. And Tollbit, the AI licensing company, even got on board to help monetize. The problem is that it was found that the company was plagiarizing from local news organizations. More than 70 of their stories were found to be directly plagiarized from local, including some of its own clients, by the way. Who found it? A journalist from Poynter. Poynter reported that as they were doing this interview, investigating this story, the company announced it was shutting down this partnership. That's accountability. No AI system is going to do that. So this free training in social media and search optimization was never free, and these free cloud credits and these free tokens are not free either. Newsrooms have limited time, limited expertise. Once you get onto one platform, you're probably going to stay on there. It costs a lot to move. And once you're on OpenAI, without guarantees that you can bring your history, or of course what the industry now calls memory, with you, then how are you going to switch? And by making these deals, they are taking a page from the social media age and trying to change the calculus of those with power in the media. But this is the key point, is this billionaire brotherhood is not just economic. They now hold positions in the US military, in the AI policy guidance. Their systems are being integrated into the US governmental system, and they are protected from regulation around the globe by threats of trade tariffs if anyone regulates them, if copyright is enforced, if we do content moderation research. By an administration that is actively dismantling democracy from the inside out. So when monopoly power and political power start coalescing in the same companies, you're not looking at a competition problem anymore. You are looking at the architecture of technofascism. So what do you do with a relationship that you can't simply leave? Because they're how you connect with people, how you find information. Some of the tools are actually useful. But you're being abused, where almost every form of collaboration deepens dependency, risks your credibility, or legitimizes a dangerous fusion of power. That's the conversation I think that this panel is going to have now.
Yes, thank you so much, Radsch. This is one perspective that we heard from you, and that's why I'm very happy that we have four additional perspectives that are going to join us. You can have a seat, and meanwhile, I will introduce our next panelists. Please welcome our next panelist. He says, to keep and build good journalism, we need to shift our focus to innovation rather than blaming. He's an entrepreneur from Silicon Valley, building a bio-AI cancer treatment company, and he also invested in many startups, including OpenAI. Looking forward to listen to your perspective. Cyriac, Roeding, please join us. My next panelist says journalism must stay curious about new technologies, but critical enough to protect the audience and itself. Welcome, Director of Innovation at ours Fatos in Brazil, Marcela Duarte. Please join us. Another perspective, you know what he says? It's easy to scream, regulate, moderate big tech. Journalism today needs to reinvent itself to serve a 21st century audience. From Berlin, general partner WIP Capital and tech entrepreneur and investor Ramzi Rizk. And last but not least, my guest has a personal story, and he knows how influential big techs can be. If you go to the internet, you'll find different deepfakes about him. What he did, he sued Meta, he won, and Meta has to delete it, but they didn't do that. Why? Let's ask him, Eckart von Hirschhausen. Welcome. So, always be ready. Any second, any minute, I'm going to ask you. So always be ready. Yeah? So, we heard from Courtney. She's saying, if she's look at the relation, it's an abusive relation. Cyriac, do you agree on that and say, yes, 100%? Microphone, every one of you, sure.
First off, I think it's important to point out one thing because, I was a journalist when I was probably 18 years old and loved it, but I'm not now. I'm an entrepreneur, I build things, and I live in Silicon Valley, so I'm bringing a different perspective. First thing I would like to say to everybody in the room, you are the fourth pillar in any democracy. And you are the second pillar in any dictatorship. And that's why you are incredibly important. Number one, to be very clear.
But.
Not but, and.
And, okay.
And I think it is high time that we leave this standard argument of big tech against poor journalists and rather actually start a conversation about what we can do about it, how we can do better, and how we can empower you by actually taking your own fate into your own hands and make it happen. And I think that's what this panel should be about.
Sure, but I still didn't get my answer to my question. How do you define this relationship? Do you see it as abusive? Because we had a very clear opinion.
So I think the relationship is very simple. It is one based on incentive structures. If you think about the incentive of big tech, what's their incentive? They want to make money. They want to use eyeballs in order to capitalize. That's the old world of social media. It's now the old world. And in that old world of social media, if you don't pay cash, you pay with brain rot. It's that simple.
Okay.
If you don't pay cash, you pay with brain rot. So that means you have to understand that the incentive structure of these companies that are driving eyeballs, TikTok, Facebook, etc., their ultimate incentive structure is to make money. They probably, and I actually believe them that, many of them probably have good intentions. They probably
do you believe or do they really have? Because
I actually think, I can't prove it because I'm not in Mark Zuckerberg's head.
No, but you're investing in OpenAI, and if
right.
we take a very clear
that's
example.
A different world. That's a different world.
But
that's
if you
AI.
take this as an example, you invest in AI. What are you investing in?
Right. So let me first answer your other question.
Okay, we're going to have a good time together.
So I think that the key point of these companies is to produce eyeballs. They might have good intentions and want to actually stay with the facts. But in most cases, the algorithms are going to be driven by a massive number of clicks. So that those platforms will live and die by good clickbait.
Okay.
The AI world is different. Because in the AI world, if you are a chatbot, your incentive structure is different. You actually are trying to say what is real, because that's what you get paid for. It's very simple. So that means the AI world has very different incentive structures than the social media world. And that is a potential starting point for a conversation what we can do about it.
All right. Marcela, how would you see the relationship?
First of all, thank you very much for having me here. I'm very glad that I could make it from Brazil. Well, when I saw the title of this panel, I have to say that I loved since the very beginning, because this love-hate relationship is what we face since the very beginning. So for me, this is perfect. And when we talk about love-hate, it doesn't mean that when we are in the loving side of it, it doesn't mean that we have sold our souls for AI and other big techs. It doesn't mean that, but it means for us, and I just would like to introduce a little bit about Fatos, where I work in Brazil. Fatos was created as a fact-checking agency. I just came from the Pointer Institute event in Vilnius, but at the very beginning it was like a fact-checking agency, but it was created also as a tech company. So for us, it's very important that journalism also creates the tools that we need. So it's very important to understand the technology. So for us, and for me especially, that's why I'm on a daily basis dealing with this love-hate approach, and that's also how I approach big techs and AI specifically, like you read my sentence about being curious but also suspicious about big techs. So I think that's how we face on a daily basis.
Do you think the partnership or the collaboration when it happens, and you use a lot of AI in your work as we had a talk, but is this collaboration deepening dependency, risking credibility, and legitimizing a dangerous fusion of power, what Courtney said?
Tough question, but I know this is a tough panel. I don't believe it has to mine the independence of journalism, but I think we have to stand for our mission. And sometimes it's very hard because, for example, Fatos is blocking the use of our content by AI, although I was participating in a workshop there and we were testing different AIs, and one of them just scraped our content, but well, it happens. I just texted my team and said, oh, wow, look what happened here, and sent them a print screen. But, sorry, I got lost. I remembered that and I got lost.
Don't worry, I'm going to tell you, is this collaboration deepening the dependency, risking the
about
credibility of journalism and the fusion of power over journalism?
No, I don't think so. It necessarily will mine the independence, but I think we have to stand for it, knowing that the big techs, the AI companies, they are looking for profits, and they will use our content, the journalistic content.
They're not paying for it. You're okay with that?
They are not paying for our contents. That's why we are blocking. But that's I think it's a very important point, because our mission is to fight disinformation, to show the lies. So since the very beginning, when we started working with social media, for example, to fight disinformation, we have to be where the audience is. So at the very beginning, we are discussing, why is Meta not paying for our content? Should we publish our content on Facebook? Should we should we use Instagram? And our answer was yes, because our audience is using those social media, and disinformation and misinformation is being spread all over social media. So we have to be there to fight disinformation.
Okay. Another perspective that Courtney talked about, I would like to ask you, Ramzi. She said a sentence, when monopoly power of the big techs and political power start merging, are we looking at the architecture of techno-fascism, as Courtney mentioned? Do you see that?
I mean, it's a good soundbite, that's for sure. I worry about trying to simplify things into just phrases that sound good and sound bombastic, right? It's a very, very, very complex world that we're living in, where everything seems to be on a spectrum except for opinions. They have to be binary, good, bad, you know, with us, Nazi.
Well, she mentioned a very concrete example, you know, when big tech CEOs came together with the president, and there was kind of a collaboration, and people were like, what is going to happen? What influence they're going to have? It's not only a soundbite. She said what is happening.
Okay, but I mean, again, we're focusing on the US as one specific place.
But I mean, these big
does
techs
that apply everywhere else? I don't see them here. I think, again, this works in that context of, oh, they're evil billionaires, and oh, they're building all of this stuff, and oh, they're creating this. We don't look at the good things. And to me, that is where the side of journalism, I think, loses a little bit of the credibility in the argument, because you don't hear about the good things that are happening. You don't hear about cancer being cured. You don't hear about us going to space. You don't hear about Starlink connecting people, allowing journalists to publish from places that they wouldn't be before. We only hear about, oh, big bad tech, right? And there's a reason for this, because that sells. So it kind of becomes part of that self-fulfilling prophecy of the attention economy. So I really don't like the question of it. Yeah, I mean, are they trying to influence? Yes. Aren't we all trying to influence? Yes. Do I like that they're doing it? No. Is that the topic that we're talking about here?
So
not so much.
If you don't like the question, would you say that big tech are doing everything for the quality and interest of journalism?
Okay, so you asked about the relationship before. I think it's, again, very hard because we're simplifying. You know, is it social media versus tech? Is that the relationship? Or is it AI versus tech? Or is it, AI versus journalism? Or is it just technology companies and startups in general? And these three things are quite distinct, and they have to be dealt with differently. You know, otherwise it's some weird, and I'm from Berlin, so it's some weird, you know, poly-open relationship that needs couples therapy to be defined, which I don't think we're there yet.
But I think, I mean, the point is big tech. Big tech refers to the American firms. It does not include the Chinese firms, which we could also be talking about. It's not about innovation. There are lots of great AI startups. We did a whole report about all the AI licensing, content marketplace startups that have come up. You know, all the market, there's, I mean, thousands of AI companies that cannot compete on a fair ground because they can't afford to steal data without taking it. They have to pay for the data that they're using so that they know it's copyright and rights protected. So this is about big tech, and it's, I think, relevant to the fact that you see explicit manipulation by, explicit and implicit manipulation by the big tech billionaires, Zuckerberg, Musk, for example. When Musk, you know, heard that its chatbot was giving out information about climate change, when people asked what the biggest threat facing humanity is, he went and tweaked it to make sure that it would talk about population replacement. That was just I mean, those are the systems that some newsrooms are using to undergird their journalism. Right, we know that that Meta and Zuckerberg reduced in their chatbots searches that would reveal that Trump, or searches about Trump and dementia. You know, so there are, I mean, it's not a soundbite, with all due respect. There's a lot of documented evidence that bring us to this point about the fusion of enormous trillion-dollar valuation with one of the most powerful military and economic powers in the world that shapes the rest of this world. How many of you live in a country where your government has been threatened with tariffs if it regulates social media, or if it regulates AI, if it regulates your digital markets? So it's not just the US.
Yeah. Ramzi?
Well, I mean, again, it's a wide range of things. We need to kind of go a little bit into the details, because you said big tech, and then you mentioned Zuckerberg and Elon Musk, right? But what about the rest? Like, are we talking about all of them? Or are we talking about a couple of them? I wouldn't say Facebook is playing in the same league when it comes to large language models, right? That's a whole different topic. That's social media. Are they manipulating things? Potentially. Are they doing it because they're evil? I don't think so. They're very much profit-driven. It's the attention economy. That is their prime directive, and they are optimizing everything to achieve that goal. And I would like to think that, you know, it's a soundbite. What I meant was, because it's very easy to kind of go and say, oh, these are the big bad evil people of today. These are the robber barons of today, you know, Zuck and so on and so forth. But 15 years ago, all of these guys used to be quite solidly on the liberal democratic side of the aisle. So what happened between then and now? Did they become evil?
That's what my talk might describe.
Do you like to be alive?
I think so.
Is that a soundbite or is it your true opinion?
I think so. I don't know.
Last year I was invited to talk about disinformation as a medical emergency. And since then, nothing got better. There are people dying now of measles because of disinformation. There are people dying of the climate crisis with heat, with floodings, with immediate danger to their lives. And people who are, thank you very much for using that metaphor, connecting their profits with geopolitical power are a threat to everything that's dear to me as a doctor, as a science journalist, and as a fan of public media. And so this is not just a debate on relationships. It really is a matter of life and death to me in the meantime. And I thank Barbara for mentioning the value of trust. I've been working as a science journalist for 30 years. I never took any advertising. So would you accept this banknote from me? If I come to you in Berlin, I give it to you, you would accept it, probably, because you know that everybody who forges money gets into prison. Forging people is allowed at the moment. I am the only Eckart von Hirschhausen existing on this planet. In the internet, you have 2,000 fakes of me selling drugs online, and this has to stop. Do you want this? I'm advertising this involuntarily. So people are misusing the trust that's so hard to build in ARD, in Deutsche Welle, in ZDF, in Deutschlandfunk, in public media that are paid by all of us. And this is being destroyed by people who are thinking a human being is only worth if it's looking at advertising, if its eyeballs are rotting his brain, and the moment you get away with this, he's not interested anymore. So we have to defend something that's very dear to the European system of values. And so we need a European social network that's not based on lies and profit, but on common goals.
Okay. I can see Cyriac.
That's good.
Okay, very short, and then I want to get to Cyriac on that, please.
Just because you addressed me, I'm fully with you. I'm 100% with you. I think the answer, though, is to solve these exact problems.
Yeah.
Right? The answer is not to go and say they're all evil. The answer is to figure out how do we build provenance and fingerprinting into content on the internet so that we can actually deterministically solve for this problem.
Yeah.
And not rely on someone to go, oh, this is good and this is bad, right? I don't think anyone wants people to die from malaria. And it is our duty to build the technologies that will make sure people get access and get to leverage the technology the best way possible.
Yeah.
But to me, the narrative should be that.
Yeah, and the medical history, what was clean water to the millions of lives saved by this measure of public health is clean information for the 21st century. And this is the puzzle we have to solve. Who can you trust? How do you tell people that there's a major difference between TikTok, Telegram, and Tagesschau? And we have to be more active. We journalists, we learned, you stay on the sideline, you just watch and you say what's happening. But when we are faced with an enemy that is so strategically destroying Europe, and Musk is not making it secretly. He said when we started to put a ban on X, he said, well, let's destroy Europe. That's where we are now. So it is something that we have to be more open and loud about, and not only doing our job as sideline keepers, but we have to defend what is dear to everyone in this room.
Regulations could be an answer on that. We'll go into that because we're running out of time. Maybe you can give us 10 minutes more Are you okay with that? You're the biggest supporter, so thank you. So to the organizers, please, could you give us 10 minutes more? Before going to regulations, we have also political power, but I'll skip that. I go to regulations. Cyriac, while Eckart was talking, you were like, I want to say something. Go ahead.
There is so much to unpack here. So the first thing is, where does journalism go? Journalism is for the people, right? Journalism will always go where the people are. So where are the people going? People are going first on social media platforms, second on AI platforms. And the one thing I would like to say, that you say this is a European value, and I agree with you. I actually grew up here. I live in the US now, but I grew up in Germany. And we keep talking about Zuck and Elon. Where do all these people, these big tech platforms come from? They all come from the United States of America. Why? Why did Europe not create its own media platforms? Where are the big platforms coming out of this continent?
We had SchülerVZ.
Sorry, what? What did you say?
We had
StudiVZ
SchülerVZ.
and
That's right.
StudiVZ.
StudiVZ. Exactly. Where did that go?
It was almost, and then
Exactly. So that's point number one. Let's get into actually creating platforms rather than debating about other people's platforms. Number two, secondly, we have to get out, if you want to get empowered, which you should be, because you are, as I said in the beginning, you're exceptionally important for society as a fourth pillar or second pillar, depending on which country you're in. So therefore, you have to find a way to get out of victimization mode. It has to be, how do we change this game? How do we own the system? How do we make the system? How do we build the system? And there are many ways of doing this. I don't want to stay only on the superficial level. So just some tidbits, right? First off, there are ways to create content people pay for. A big thing that people have not believed in until the New York Times tried it. The Wall Street Journal then really didn't believe it when Murdoch bought it. Guess what? Today they have a paywall. People are paying for it. So there's high quality content that people are willing to pay for. And as I said before, if you don't pay cash, you pay with brain rot. The second thing is, if you don't pay for the product, you are the product. And you know that already. And that product is called eyeballs. So if you want to get out of this business, people have to start paying for good content. If you want to pay for good content, the content has to be really good. If the content is really good, it needs to be discoverable. If it wants to be discoverable, you need to be on these platforms and use them rather than have them use you.
but
I'm
Okay,
sorry,
yeah,
but
sure.
this is...
I'm going to pause here.
I totally agree with you that we need to build alternatives. And I love the fact, for example, that the Journalism Cloud Alliance is literally building its own cloud infrastructure so that we don't have to depend on big tech, the 3 hyperscalers. We are talking about how could we build a large language model and thinking about how could you bring in fact checking, because that is really valuable. So we are building, but that is not, I mean, this is specifically about big tech, and you do make a choice. Every newsroom in this room is making a choice about whether they're going to deepen their relationship with big tech by using OpenAI or using, Google or whatever, Amazon, in their productivity and editorial processes, or if they're going to work on supporting open source alternatives, building their own, going with something maybe smaller but not as great. I mean, talking to Proton, for example, they're a privacy-first European alternative. Their products aren't quite as good as Google's productivity tools, in part because not as many people are using them to improve them. So there's this bind. And it wasn't just that, so I'm from California. I went to Berkeley in the first .com bubble. This is not just about like, hey, we were so innovative. They came to these countries and they turned law breaking into a competitive advantage. Right here we're talking about, using content without payment. That is theft. In any other domain, even a bottle of water has a nutrition label to tell you what is in it and has a certain, requirements about how you can produce and sell it. We don't, and yet somehow we're talking about it's so hard to regulate AI. I think this is really problematic. And if you think about the first 15 years of these platforms existing, it's not about whether they're evil or not. The journalism gave them, there was very little critical journalism in the beginning of the social media age. Now there's a lot of critical journalism because I think the lessons were learned. We cannot be sycophantic towards these companies that hold so much power. And we are talking about big tech. Again, as I said in the opening, this handful of companies, Silicon-based, billionaire-run companies that have no accountability.
Okay. So I'm turning to you now because I would like that you participate with us in the following question, because we talked more often about regulation. And now take like 30 seconds. We should see the Mentimeter and think. How should big tech be regulated and by whom? Governments, platforms, journalists, or users, or I think there's another one, not sure yet. So what do you think?
Yeah, we need a combo up there.
So 10, 9, 3, 2, 1. Thank you. So we can see it seems very obvious until now that the majority says governments. Cyriac, what would be your answer?
Well, I think that the certain laws are absolutely important, and I think most of the laws we need we already have, but we may not be enforcing them very well. The thing that I'm really, really careful about is regulation versus legislation. Regulation is to me a bunch of long-standing big rules, frameworks, and what we're seeing is there are these really almost funny, but if it wasn't so sad, kind of statements where Mark Zuckerberg, one of the venture capitalists in Silicon Valley, likes to make the quote that he talked to Europeans and about innovation, and they said, well, in AI, we can't be the innovation leaders anymore, but we can be world leaders in regulating AI. Well, good luck with that. With that, you're going to get really far. You're essentially just trying to put, the kibosh on things that other people innovate on. Once again, the world doesn't get boxed in. The world moves forward. It keeps moving where the eyeballs go and where the interests go and where people go, because that's who you're writing for. So from my point of view, I'm not against laws. I'm actually for making sure laws are being followed. No question about it. But what I think is much more powerful is to create platforms, citizen journalism, new platforms of integrating content, new platforms of capitalizing on high-quality journalism, combining events businesses with high-quality journalism, like, for example, like The Atlantic does it, in order to fund itself, stay independent. There are all kinds of models. AI is a big opportunity now, and if you think AI is just like social media, I don't think it is at all. The incentive structures are different. AI companies actually want to be accurate because they live for that. That's their incentive structure. That's how they make money. So you can actually trust them a lot more, I think, in terms of wanting to be accurate than a social media platform that is based on eyeballs and clicks. So therefore, leverage AI. AI can do a lot of the standard newsroom work. You can do the actual investigative journalism. That's where the real opportunity lies, in combining these factors, bring them together, leverage what you can, build new platforms, and actually take your own future in your hands. And I think that's what the world needs, because you need to be independent.
I would like to comment on that, because when I look at the audience, we have people coming from 110 countries, from different countries, and not every country there's freedom of speech. There's enough money being invested in journalism, but access to information is a human right. And it has an effect how democracies function, how societies function. When I listen to you, you see it from a certain perspective where you take it for granted that people have the money to subscribe to The Atlantic. You take it for granted that there is technology. You take it for granted. And this is something people are criticizing because they are afraid they're going to be elite and they are the ones having the power and they decide who has which information when and what access. What do you say to that?
I think it's an excellent point you're making. I think we have to very much
But
differentiate.
it contradicts a bit what you said.
I agree. I agree, and that's why I wanted to answer. So I think that is very true that we have two different worlds. There is a world where there's money, and there is a world where there's no money. And those are two different worlds. If I look at the developed world, what I said is what I mean and what applies. When you talk about countries that are repressed, where people don't have money to pay for the Atlantic, the world is different. There, I think we have a responsibility as the world that actually does have money to help finance news in the world that doesn't have money. We have to help with philanthropic approaches, maybe even with government funding from the Western world to other parts of the world in order to support journalism. It's a very different situation. We are talking about big tech. Big tech has to do with big money. That usually has to do with the developed world because that's
on
where
the
money
cost
is.
of what?
Not at all. I mean, I'm sorry, we have 110 countries here. Is anyone, raise your hand if you are not using a big tech platform in your country? Right, so not a single hand. Big tech, that is why it's big tech. It actually shapes the entire world's information ecosystems. I mean, I'm looking at my friend Paula here from Brazil. I mean, they are grappling with how Google spent massive amounts of money lobbying against a piece of legislation that would have required it to pay compensation for some of the value created by the use of journalistic content on its platforms. And then, that got torpedoed. I think that, we should be talking about breaking these companies up so that we can break up their power. But here we're talking about what journalism can do, and we're not in the era of eyeballs. I mean, we are, yes, eyeballs still matter, but how many of you have thought to yourself, how should I be writing this or producing this so that it will show up on an AI chatbot? Because I'm hearing that a lot about we are now writing for AI, we are now producing for AI. Not everyone, but a lot. And so now we actually have two audiences, right? We have the eyeballs, the traditional ones, the people, and we have the machines.
May I say a word from the Global South? I see that I'm the representative here from the Global South. Because, of course, I love this idea, and I agree with you. It would be wonderful if we could have our social media. This world, when we produce like very high-quality reporting, we do that also. We are not only a fact-checking agency, we report about disinformation in general, and I would love that people could pay for that. But I come from Brazil. People don't have money sometimes to eat. Is it fair enough that I want people to pay for their content? I don't think so. Of course, we look for the very successful examples from the North, the Global North, and we have like a membership program, and we try to go crowdfunding for our stories. It doesn't work very well in Brazil because people simply, they don't have money. So it's not enough to look for the successful cases from the Global North because we are very different. And I agree with you, this is like a lovely idea. But we tested it so many times, and I think the reality is really different. I agree when you say that we have people with money and people with no money. Unfortunately, I'm on this side that has no money.
Marcela, I'll give you just, Marcela, are you for more regulations? Because there's another perspective that says regulation might stop innovation. So where?
Our love-hate panel, isn't it? Like, we always go to this love-hate relation that we have.
But do you think it stops innovation? Because that's also an argument I heard.
Yeah, yes, and I very often hear this accusation, but I think it's like a balance. It's possible to have regulation, but with innovation. So, but it's always, we have to look for what kind of harming the AI companies, the social media, the big techs, what kind of harm they are doing. And the pandemic in Brazil was like a huge example. We had people dying because they were drinking chloroquine. So it's an example. But I think it's possible, and it's like we always have to deal with the regulating, that is important, but also on the other hand, seeing how can we regulate without stopping innovations. And sometimes it's something that we will struggle on that.
Okay. I see Ende. 2 minutes, I promise you, and then it's Ende. Eckart, we have the Digital Service Act in Europe. You sued Meta, to sum up, you sued Meta, you won, they have to delete. You have the Digital Service Act, should be implemented, should be done. It didn't happen. So what should change when it comes to regulations?
Make the platforms responsible for their content. We are accepting things in the digital world that we never accept in print, for example. Meta is doing about 10% of their revenue with fraud. And we would never accept a supermarket where you...
$16 billion.
Yeah, a Reuters leak. I'm happy to share this if you watch Erde Mediathek, Hirschhausen, die Deepfake.
It's a very good documentary. More than 4 million people watch it in Germany.
And we would never accept a supermarket where 10% of the articles are fraud, and the owner knows this. So we have to use another word, because regulation immediately says, oh, we don't want this. This is against innovation. But I think the parallel is interesting, that we are having a tobacco moment at the moment with social media. We have to talk about the addictive structure behind it. We are seeing a mental health crisis in the youth. There's a huge debate on responsibility for, if you look at the social dilemma. So we have to put this into context. I recommend 2 sources. One is Merchants of Doubt, about the similarity of the structure, how tobacco was sharing this information. Same with climate, same with social media now. And the second thing is amusing ourselves to death. When I started in journalism in 1985, Neil Postman seemed so far away. He said the remote control, as your point of shared reality, is teaching us whenever we don't like something, you can switch the channel. And this is a remote control on steroids.
Okay. We take it as, I know every one of you would add to the conversation more, but I have someone in my ear telling me Ende, 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 and stop. I don't know if I'm going to be able to moderate next year. I don't think so. They will say, don't give him the moderation. Thank you, Eckart, Ramzi, Marcela, Cyriac, and Courtney. And thank you to every one of you for joining the conversation. Thank you so much.